Good evening, and welcome to this edition of Colorado Outspoken. I'm Stephen Montez. On tonight's show, we'll be taking a look at violence in and on the GLBT community. We'll take a look at the legal advice for Jim Boham, who has been accused of murdering a Denver gay man. We'll explore addiction in the gay community. We'll visit a local bakery that makes things that are sexy and sensuous as they are delicious. And we'll be going to the Gold Rush to discover our own gender identity. Of course, we also have the news and a first look at a gay movie. Up first is our two-part look at addictions in the GLBT community. Watch for part 2 in our next show. Here's final notes to explore this issue.
Are you more at risk for substance abuse? You might be. Drug and alcohol use is a significant issue in the GLBT community. We see it in the media, in the community, and often in our own homes. What's causing this phenomenon, and what can be done to help solve this pressing problem? To help us wade through this wide-reaching conundrum is Judy Calhoun, the Executive Director of the GLBT Community Center of Colorado, which is the lead agency for Smoke-Free GLBT. Welcome, Judy.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Fantastic. Nicole Fardell is a local psychotherapist who is working on providing competent care to the GLBT community, including making treatment for substance dependence a safe place for anyone, regardless of sexuality or gender identity. Glad to have you, Nicole.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Well, let's start with Smoke-Free GLBT. What is that, Judy?
Smoke-Free GLBT is a statewide project funded through some of the tobacco tax grants that includes the center and 6 project partners around the state and here in Denver, and then also our youth services program through Rainbow Alley.
So are we starting to see more treatment that's specific to GLBT or programs that are addressing GLBT?
What we are doing right now is actually doing some data collection. One of the issues for the GLBT community when it comes to a variety of health issues is that we've not been studied. Sexual orientation and gender identity are not usually questions asked when data collection is done on a variety of health issues. So we're trying to find out a little bit more about why people in the GLBT community smoke and what could help them stop smoking. What have they tried, what's worked, those types of things. And then we'll start to model, do some test projects based on that information. We've also been doing some work between our project partners and the local county tobacco programming, so that the counties are starting to include LGBT issues within their tobacco work. We've been doing some training of the quit line to make the staff on the quit line, again, more sensitive to sexual orientation and gender identity. And then based on what projects work, what seems to be helpful, we'll be doing more work in the community around Colorado. Our project partners include the Lambda Community Center in Fort Collins, Boulder Pride in Boulder, Pikes Peak Gay and Lesbian Community Center in Colorado Springs, Western Equality in Grand Junction, El Futuro here in Denver, and Brothers Forever also here in Denver.
So it seems like this has become a huge issue, not only in Colorado, but
nationwide. Yes, nationwide it's an issue.
Is it true that the gay community is more at risk for addictions? Nicole, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it is absolutely true, unfortunately. The research just tells us that we're at higher risk, that, you know, for youth who are going through the same issues that all adolescents are going through, they have the added piece of sorting through their identity, you know, their sexual identity or their gender identity, of dealing with homophobia, of heterosexism, and that just puts on the added stressors, you know, in youth, but for the whole community that really put us at greater risk. Another piece is that the care, you know, the treatment isn't always available to the GLBT community in a safe way. You know, you don't know if you're going to go into a group, and if you disclose your identity, how's the group going to react? Sure. Are the providers going to know issues specific to what you're dealing with? So a lot of things that Judy is talking about is so important, to have that outreach, to have a place for people in the community to go that they know they're going to get safe care.
And does that include smoking? Are we more at risk for smoking?
We are definitely more at risk for smoking. Actually, lesbians smoke almost 3 times the rate of straight women.
Wow.
And gay men, it's about 50% higher than straight men. LGBT youth, again, smoke at significantly higher rates than their their straight peers. And those are, again, limited studies, but a number of them, and all seem to point to some of the same issues in terms of that. And one of the things we were talking a little bit earlier about that Nicole brought up, you know, in an area like Denver, that's a large metropolitan area, it is much easier to find resources. You get into more rural areas, less populated areas, and the resources are more limited, and you do worry much more about how safe those resources are.
So I go into treatment and it's a very unfriendly, unsafe place to be. Possibly. Am I going to finish it out? Possibly, am I going to complete my treatment? Do we know anything about failure rates of treatment centers for gay and lesbians? You don't have to know that. I'm just wondering.
You know, one thing that I did read was that there's, when you have GLBT-specific treatment, so like the center offers a 12-step program, that the treatment rates and the dropout rates are much less. The treatment is much more successful than when someone gets treatment just in the general area. So.
Excellent. So that's good. That says a lot for smoke-free GLBT.
Right. And for any of the work that our agencies do around any kind of substance abuse. It is really important. Whether or not people use the specific programs, also knowing that a program they go into is going to be sensitive to sexual orientation and gender identity issues is really important. Knowing that your healthcare provider is sensitive and aware of those issues and is going to be open is also really important. And much of the work around substance abuse has to do with healthcare.
Sure.
I mean, it's
so in Colorado, people can use your Find a Provider website.
And that's all. I mean, that's part of the resources that an agency like the center provides. But again, in some of these rural areas, our project partners with Smoke-Free GLBT are dealing with much more limited resources, much less friendly and supportive community. Yes, yes, yes.
So what can be done, whether it's substance abuse or whether it's the quit line, what can be done to make it a more friendly atmosphere or safe atmosphere for GLBT people?
Training providers, you know, making sure that there are very clear statements that there will be no tolerance of any, you know, type of homophobic comments made in the group, addressing issues, asking questions about people's identity as they're coming in, being able to do that on a one-on-one basis. One of the things that I've been doing at the University of Colorado is working on developing a treatment program for students who are at risk for getting suspended from the university. And that brings the issue up right there of how do we make that an inclusive group so that all people, you know, can come in and feel like it's a safe environment. So one of the things we do is, you know, have a one-on-one meeting with them, have check-ins regularly to make sure things are going okay, but also just advocate in the group, make statements ourselves as, you know, group leaders that are very, you know, affirming and inclusive of everyone.
Showing good models for behavior.
Exactly.
What are you telling the people at the quit line?
The training we've been doing on the quit line is general sensitivity to LGBT issues, trying to have them actually ask the questions, because part of it is if the question doesn't get asked, if you don't get asked about, you know, what's your, whether you want to actually say what's your sexual orientation or what's your living situation or describe your home environment or who are the significant people in your life, some of those types of things, if those questions don't get asked, oftentimes for many people it's hard to bring it up. You know, the work I do, I get really used to saying, you know, my partner this or whatever. But for a lot of people who are in a much more closeted environment, or again, as Nicole said, don't know whether it's going to be safe, how often do you say, well, you know, I'm gay and
you're putting yourself out there quite a bit.
You're taking a risk. And then for folks who are transgendered to go into those issues is an even bigger risk. And you're already confiding something, you know, you're calling the quit line to say, I want to stop smoking, or you're going to an AA meeting to say, I want to quit drinking, or, you know, another 12-step group, or another substance abuse program, you're already confiding something that's incredibly personal.
Sure.
And so it's really important that the providers are open to asking some of those questions that make it a safe place.
And open to letting the client decide how they want to deal with that. Do they want to be out in the group? Do they want to discuss that? And not assuming that their identity is necessarily a contributing factor to their substance abuse issue, because it can be and it cannot be.
Do you think that it's beneficial to have strictly GLBT groups for recovery?
I do.
Why do you think that would be beneficial?
Because you're in a group of people where you know people are going to get it, you know it's going to be safe, you don't have to have that added pressure. It's hard enough to go in and get treatment to deal with this. And so if you're going into a group and you say something, there's, you know, some comment made against gay people by another person in the group, that could be a trigger to use. Sure. I mean, if you experience, you know, the homophobia in the group, that's part of what you're dealing with outside of the group. It's just not a good situation. I mean, I think there can be groups. I think we need to have groups that can have everyone there. I don't think we need to have only exclusively GLBT groups. But I think it is important to have that option available. Definitely.
Judy, do you think that that kind of atmosphere, as Nicole was saying, would act as a trigger? And maybe even keep people from seeking treatment because of that?
I mean, my sense is that it probably keeps people from seeking treatment, and it may be a reason to leave treatment. You know, if you get that kind of a trigger, you don't want to go back. Not a substance abuse issue, but we had a person who called in several months ago whose partner is in an Alzheimer's care facility, and she wanted a support group, and she'd gone to one of the general Alzheimer's spouse support group and didn't find it supportive because somebody had made a comment.
Sure.
You know, another person might not have reacted the same way, but
we don't really need any more hurdles.
We don't need any more hurdles, not at all. What's interesting when it comes to tobacco is that some of the research shows actually that LGBT folks are not necessarily interested in support groups. And I think it'll be interesting to see as we finish our surveys this spring as part of the Smoke-Free GLBT project, to see what people really do say. The research
they're trying to force something upon them that may not even work, may not even be interested in.
And a lot of the data we have is from a study done in California.
So we still need more research.
We need a lot more research on our community, especially when it comes to our health issues, and we need those folks that do general health research to include sexual orientation and gender identity. Those are important issues.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, we're running out of time. And I want to, it goes very quickly, and I want to hit on a little bit of what would you suggest to our viewers if they're dealing with either a substance abuse problem or a smoking problem, what would you suggest to them? Nicole?
To definitely contact the center, to find out about some of the groups that are going on there, to use the website for finding the treatment providers. Look for support in your friends, with your family as well.
If it's there, if that's available.
If it's available, absolutely.
Judy?
And I would say get help. We want this community to be healthier across the board, and that's really important to us. And if you have friends that you think have substance abuse issues of any sort, give them the support to get help too. I think as a community we've kind of not necessarily pushed our friends and those people who are really important to us to get help and to take care of themselves.
And often we have this idea that, well, they're not family, so I shouldn't dictate what they have to do, but they call us family for a reason. I mean, our friends become our family.
Exactly.
They are our main source of support.
Well, and I think we want to be supportive of each other. We want to be open to all of our differences. We've lived in a society that says this is the box you're supposed to be in, and we don't want to be in that box. But when it comes to substance abuse, encourage, if it's something that you personally think is an issue for you, get help. And if it's something that's an issue for the people around you, encourage them to do it, because that's showing you care about them.
Yeah. And if I've learned anything from tonight, it's that there are resources available. There are safe places to go. So I think that was a great idea of contacting the center, looking at their website, and getting more information.
And getting more help. Yeah.
Well, thank you both. I know we've just hit the tip of the iceberg, but that's all the time we have for today. Darn it, we'll have to pick this up a different day. Well, we have to leave it there for tonight. I want to thank my guests, Judy Calhoun.
Thank you.
And Nicole Fardell.
And thank you, Fawn.
Thanks for being with us tonight. Be safe and have fun. Good night.
For a long time now, folks around Denver who need a slightly knotted birthday cake have known just where to go. La Bakerie Sensual. Let's go see what it's all about.
It was started by a guy in New York. There's an erotic baker there, and he thought Denver needed it. And he opened this place, and I started decorating cakes when I was 18, and ended up buying it a few years later. I was an art school dropout, so no formal training at all. Cake decorating has all just been learning as we go. When I bought the business, it was at 9th and Spear by the old Racine's restaurant. We do all kinds of cakes for any occasion, specialize in erotic, but we're pretty famous for kids' cakes, bachelor parties, bachelorette parties, groom's cakes, all that kind of stuff. Clientele is 95% female, and then a few gay guys. Gay people know who we are. It's straight people come in to buy a donut or a loaf of bread. They're surprised sometimes, but I think most gay people know who we are. That's the fun part for me, is making like little teeny rivets on something that someone might not even notice, but I think is beautiful. The best of both worlds is we can do a big penis cake and also do a little teddy bear for a 2-year-old. Are the both worlds we're talking about. Luckily, being in the middle of all the news channels where we're located, yeah, we get all the sportscasters come in, the anchors. Yeah. What I'm doing right now is going to be a bed with Matthew McConaughey tied to it, naked. And it'll probably take me an hour, hour and a half. Valentine's Day is our holiday. We've been preparing for that since December, getting ready for it. It's for sure our busiest holiday. Of course, our website is our name, so that's just labakeriesensual.com. It's beautiful. It has great photos on it, really cool ideas, and our phone number is 303-777-5151.
Fawn Notes recently had a chance to go visit some old friends and meet new ones at this year's Gold Rush, sponsored by the Gender Identity Center. Take it away, Fawn.
1 year ago today, we started our new format, and we started off with the Gender Identity Conference. So we're back again. See what new things have come about in the transgender community and see some old friends. Take a look.
Trans people who have transitioned full-time for the past 3 years have been forced to carry ID with a gender marker that disrespects and inaccurately portrays who they are. This basically outs them as trans people. Every time that we cash a check, every time that we go through an airport, rent a car, so many times that these days that we're required to present ID. Actually, the people that we've worked with, the directors of the Department of Revenue and Division of Motor Vehicles, were really wonderful to work with. They are very concerned these days about issues of identity fraud and issues of security and authenticity of documents that are presented in support of applications for driver's licenses. And we were very happy to listen to their concerns.
I actually do a radio show, and I've been involved with helping the community for over 30 years. That's because I've had a disability, so I've put my energy into working with the transsexual community.
And tell us a little bit about your radio show.
Well, the radio show was an idea I had that when Gender Talk, which was on the air for 12 years, was going off the air after 12 years, and I called up a friend of mine in Southern California named Susan Moses, and I said, how would you love to do a radio show to pick up where the void was being left? And we just flew by the seat of her pants. I told her I would be the producer and I would get the more known people in our community, and she could do the interviews. And so I just started writing emails, and it's just been amazing.
I'm trying to get the manuscript completed for the monograph entitled The Politics of Transgender Identity. which is a statistically based book from survey data that I and my partner have gathered, explaining or attempting to explain how being transgender and identifying as transgender and being a political being, Aristotle's right, we're all political beings, and how they intersect and interrelate and perhaps react and proact among those two categories.
Sodomy, bigotry, and coming out. It's all in the news. Here's Rick Miller to fill you in.
Gay rights groups believe the combination of the falling popularity of the Bush White House and the rise of the Democratic Congress will lend momentum to passing a hate crimes bill this spring and an anti-job discrimination measure this summer. Allison Hurwitz, legislative director for the Human Rights Campaign, said, "We are no longer on the defensive, spending time and resources fighting the federal marriage amendment." Saying homosexual acts are as immoral as having an extramarital affair with the spouse of a service member, General Peter Pace, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, voiced his support for maintaining the military's ban on openly gay personnel. Pace told the Chicago Tribune, "I believe homosexual acts between two individuals are immoral and that we should not condone immoral acts. I do not believe this United States is well served by a policy that says it is okay to be immoral in any way." In responding to General Pace's comments, the Service Members Legal Defense Network wants him to apologize. In a statement on its website, SLDN said, "General Pace's comments are outrageous, insensitive, and disrespectful to the 65,000 lesbian and gay troops now serving in our armed forces." Looking for something a little macabre to do on Friday the 13th this April? The Denver Gay Men's Chorus, celebrating its 25th season, is joining forces with the Denver Women's Chorus in presenting The Dark Side of Music at 7:30 p.m. in St. John's Cathedral at 14th and Washington. Tickets are available at Tickets West, King Soopers, Wildflowers, or online at www.dgmc.org. New Hampshire's openly gay state representative, Jim Splain, a Democrat from Portsmouth, is using a two-pronged approach in seeking marriage rights. He is sponsoring a compromise spousal union bill offering equivalent marriage rights, as well as an amendment to grant marriage by name to same-sex couples. Bullying based on sexual orientation in any Iowa public school must be addressed by officials under a comprehensive new law signed recently by Governor Chet Culver. The law, which requires all 365 public school districts to devise anti-bullying prevention and punishment policies, is the 10th such measure in the country. Openly gay New York City Council Speaker Christine Quinn once again will skip the Big Apple's St. Patrick's Day Parade, which does not permit LGBT groups to participate. Instead, she will march in Dublin, Ireland's event. Quinn said, "I hope my participation in the Dublin March will send a message about the importance of inclusion." The Utah legislature has adjourned its current session without taking action on an amendment to repeal its sodomy law, which exempts married opposite-sex couples. The bill, which was sponsored by Democratic State Senator Scott McCoy, the only openly gay member of the Utah Senate, was an attempt to bring the state in line with a 2003 U.S. Supreme Court ruling striking down similar laws. Some liberal U.S. Episcopalians say their church shouldn't give in to demands by the Anglican Communion to cease consecrating openly gay bishops and blessing same-sex unions. Catherine Jefferts-Scory, the U.S. Church's presiding bishop, agreed to the September 30th deadline to change its policies, but her decision also must be approved by U.S. bishops who met recently in Houston. Verizon, Sallie Mae, and Georgia-based NetBank removed their ads from Ann Coulter's website in the wake of the right-wing author calling Democratic presidential contender John Edwards a faggot. None of the three major marketers said they were aware the ads were on Coulter's site until they received complaints, since the ads were placed by a third-party company. Coulter would not comment on the action. A bookmark distributed by the Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services not only teaches teens and children about HIV and AIDS, it provides a phone number that patches them into a hardcore sex hotline. St. Joseph resident Lori Felzine said she found out about the hotline when her 6th grade son dialed the number printed on a bookmark he received during a health lesson at Bessie Ellison Elementary School. Concerned that San Francisco's storied Castro neighborhood is losing its identity as a center for LGBT life, a citizens group backed by a $100,000 city planning effort is taking steps to preserve its gay ambiance. Other major cities, including Chicago and Washington, are seeing LGBT people moving or being displaced from traditional gay neighborhoods. The unexpected decision 2 months ago by lawmakers in the northern Mexico border state of Coahuila to grant property and inheritance rights to same-sex couples is helping to spur advances in gay rights throughout Mexico. Openly gay federal Congressman David Sanchez said, "There is going to be a domino effect across the country. This movement cannot be stopped." That opinion will perhaps be tested by the disclosure in Mexico that 22-year-old pop star Christian Chavez of the Mexican group RBD is gay. That item has become front-page news in the conservative Catholic country. Chavez, who reportedly married his partner in Canada, is the first major celebrity to come out in Mexico. Former boy bander and aspiring cosmonaut Lance Bass is adding a new title to his resume, author. The one-time NSYNC heartthrob plans to reveal all about his life, his music, and his sexuality in a memoir, Out of Sync. The book will hit stores in October. In it, Bass will talk about his life as a gay man, including his struggle to keep his sexuality hidden from fans, and his decision to come out of the closet on the cover of People magazine. Finally tonight, we want to remind you that the April edition of Metro Mode magazine will be hitting the shelves soon. Metro Mode is the premier publication for the GLBT community, covering news, fashion, features, and entertainment. You'll want to be on the lookout for the next issue at more than 200 places along the Front Range. Until next time, this is Rick Miller for Colorado Outspoken.
Violence, whether motivated by hate, lust, or greed, is just one of the ugly sides of human nature, and is especially tragic when it targets members of our own community. Here's Dale Johnson to tell us more.
Late last year, a crime occurred that shocked the Denver LGBT community. An openly gay man was murdered, and the alleged perpetrator was described in the mainstream media as a homophobic gay porn star. The death of John Kelso was a tragedy that should never have happened. To prevent something like it from happening again, it might be useful to know more about the man accused of the crime. Here with me tonight to explore that is Donna Thomas, who presently serves as legal advocate for Timothy Boham, the accused. Ms. Thomas is a trained legal researcher and lawyer who has worked with many high-profile cases. Also with me tonight is Susan Strong, Timothy Boham's mother. Susan is from a small town in south-central Nebraska where Tim was also raised. Donna, Susan, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
So Donna, what can you tell me about Timothy Boham and how you became involved in this case?
Well, I knew Mr. Kelso. I did some legal work for him. And when I was informed that JP had been murdered, and I was reading the media reports, I found them to be inaccurate. They didn't coincide with what I knew about JP. So I just kind of sat back and watched as the case unfolded. And when Timothy was arrested and charged with JP's murder, and I read the things that were being said about Timothy, I thought there was a very good chance that there could be a lot of inaccuracies written about him as well. So I reached out to Tim, and I said, Tim, I'm a legal researcher, I'm an advocate. I knew JP, I know what's being written about him is not true, according to the experiences that I had with him. If you need any help with research, advocacy, please let me know and I'd be happy to help you. And he did. He reached back to me and said, any help that you could give me would be appreciated, and that's how I became involved in the case.
So it was your concern that your actual experience of who J.P. Kelso was inaccurate, so you thought that what was being presented about Timothy Boham had a chance of also being inaccurate.
Absolutely. That's
so,
correct.
Susan, why don't you talk to that, some of the inaccuracies that have been presented in the media about Timothy?
Well, I know there's a young woman that has made statements about that he cleansed the apartment that he lived in above her because a gay man had lived there. That's an absolute lie. And I don't know much about this young woman, except I do know that my son has said that she was interested in him and he did not show like interest in her. And so you can draw your own conclusions from, you know, that as to what prompted her to say the things she did about him. But Timothy has told me, he said, if I hated gay people, he said, then I'd hate a part of myself, because he was drawn to gay men because he could talk to them and have a relationship with them. He didn't do well with the straight community. For example, he was at a I think it was 2002 parade, gay pride parade here in Denver, and he walked up to a gentleman who was dressed in camouflage clothing and asked him about the hot dogs that were being served, and the man took the time to point out that they were all beef hot dogs and explain what it was. And he said if it had been a straight guy, he probably would have said, just buy the blankety blank hot dog. And you know, and he said that gay men would sit down and talk with him, and even now in jail he has relationships with gay men that are conversations. He's had gay cellmates. He doesn't hate gay people.
So it's the portrait that is being painted of him as being gay-hating. That is the most inaccurate.
That's a lie. He's had gay friends. He stayed in California in the gay community. The person that he stayed with out there was HIV positive, and he told this person, he said, I'm really sorry that you are, because I would have liked to have had more of a relationship with you. And so his feelings are not anti-gay, and he was a friend to JP. He said that his relationship with JP was more than just a physical relationship. He had a friendship with JP, and he wanted people to understand that he did not hate JP and doesn't now. And he said JP didn't deserve what happened to him.
Another thing that's been made a lot of course, because of the sensationalistic angle, is his past with the gay porn industry.
Yes.
And a lot of the reports make it seem like it's a real recent thing. Can you sort of speak to that?
The last time that he was actually on an adult film set was in July of 2004. When he was arrested, it was November of 2006. So that's 2 years prior, before 2.5 years back. Now, to someone 40, that's not a lot of time. But to someone 25, that's a lot amount of time. That's a huge amount of time. So that he was recently out of the gay porn industry, that's a complete inaccurate statement. Last time he was on a set was July of 2004, and he was completely out of it at that point. And also he lived, like Susan said, in West Hollywood, which is probably 99% gay. People that are gay live there. He lived with another well-known gay porno star, like she said. We won't say his name, but he lived cohesively and peacefully among the gay community and never had any problems in doing so.
So would you talk a little bit about Timothy's background, his family, sort of to fill out a little bit more round picture of who he actually was?
Well, he was born in Omaha, but then we moved, when he was 4 years old, we moved up to Stewart, Nebraska, which is in the north central part of the state, but it's right south of the South Dakota border, about 1,000 people living in that town. And he was, his father was physically and verbally abusive, and he also suffered a lot of abuse at the hands of the kids in the school. He was small for his age. He didn't grow until a lot later in life, and so they harassed him unmercifully, you know, putting his backpack up on the top shelves so he had to climb up to get it every day, and you know, and putting him in the dumpster, and you know, the bigger boys did, they picked on him. And so his memories of living in a small town were really terrible. It's been said also that he fought and beat people to a pulp. He had an experience, if this girl is the one that has said this, he had an experience with a young man who was on drugs and on alcohol, and this person pushed at him and pushed at him and pushed at him, and Tim begged him to leave him alone. And my daughter even met this young man and told him, and she said they went to a comedy club one night, the comedy club here, and the comedian on stage almost took off after this guy because he was harassing him so badly. And Tim finally took him outside and fought with him because this guy would not leave him alone and kept pushing him to fight him. And he said afterwards, this young man apologized to Tim for pushing him that far. Tim was not a person who, he was an impatient person, many times impatient with people, but he was not the type of person that would go and pick fights just to beat somebody up.
So can we speak a little bit about the danger of the media coverage being particularly one-sided without giving us a full picture of who the perpetrator and the victim really are? Can you tell us about what the danger of that is?
Well, for instance, I worked on another high-profile case, Scott Peterson. And in Scott's case, he was convicted before he was ever arrested because of the media. I mean, they made him out to be a monster. Whether his guilt or innocence is a side issue. His trial was not fair because of the publicity prior, and because they were just saying he was guilty, he was an adulterer, and so inaccuracies in the media and slanting it in a certain way really, really disables a person's ability to have a fair trial. It really does. And that's what my chief concern is at this point as his legal advocate.
Well, thank you so much. We will have to leave it there because we have run out of time. But I want to thank my guests, Donna Thomas.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
And Susan Strong.
Thank you for having me here.
For being with us tonight and for bringing us their unique perspective on this very important case. The murder of John Kelso has been joined, unfortunately, by several other instances of violence against members of our community, most notably 2 recent incidents in Boulder. Here to help us explore violence on and within the gay community is Veronica Garcia, Executive Director of the Colorado Anti-Violence Program. Welcome, Veronica.
Thanks for having me, Daryl.
Let's talk a little bit about the incidents up in Boulder that have happened recently that have been so widely reported in the media.
Sure. The first incident that we really saw come out of Boulder recently, received quite a bit of media attention, was the assault of a lesbian woman. It was right at the end of February. There were 2 perpetrators in that assault, and neither of them have been caught yet. We received reports of a more recent incident this last weekend of an assault on 2 gay men by 2 CU students. The 2 perpetrators in that incident actually have been arrested. So that's what we're able to kind of tell with regards to those 2 incidents at this point.
Has the police department response in investigating these crimes been adequate?
Definitely. Boulder Police Department has been really great about acknowledging that, in fact, the 2 incidents were reflective of hate crime. So they've been really great about acknowledging that. We have yet to actually see how the case in which arrests were actually made, we have yet to see how charges will be brought with regards to the legal case there. But Boulder Police Department has been really, really great about acknowledging that hate crimes have occurred in both of those incidents.
Well, we can't really talk about the specific victims of these crimes because of victim confidentiality. Why don't you talk a little bit about the effect of these types of crimes on the larger community?
Definitely. One of the things that we always want to emphasize through the work that we do at the Colorado Anti-Violence Program is the impact that hate crimes have on larger communities. So we definitely recognize that there are individual victims anytime that we talk about an incident of hate violence. But we also think it's really important to point out the impact that hate violence can have on the larger community. Right now, we really hear reports of kind of just very generalized fear and anxiety coming forth from the larger community. We're really particular to make a distinction between random violence and hate violence. What's really important in that distinction is that when we talk about hate violence, we're really talking about a very targeted violence. We're talking about communities that are very targeted based on identities. So it's going to be really different from random violence and really has an impact in terms of sending a message loud and clear to our community that we're in danger, that we're vulnerable, and we're at risk. We never know when we might be impacted by violence.
I noticed on some statistics that I pulled off of your website from a larger national report on violence statistics that the data that Colorado provided, it actually appeared that incidents had gone down in the reporting period, which was 2005. And that can be created by a lot of anomalies. Can you speak to what some of those factors might have been to change those statistics?
Yeah, one of the things that we always talk about is the dynamic of underreporting. So whenever we look at the numbers that we're actually able to report with regards to hate incidents, we always have to consider the fact that we will never hear about all of the incidents that actually occur. The numbers that we're able to present are always going to be just a baseline to demonstrate that, in fact, we did experience hate violence. But we always have to remember that the numbers that we provide will never be representative of all of the incidents that are actually occurring that are never reported to us.
Even while the numbers of specific incidents reported had dropped, it seemed like the severity of those incidences that were reported and the injuries associated with those incidents had risen dramatically. Is that a trend that seems to be nationwide as well as just here in Colorado?
Definitely. We saw several programs in 2005 that actually reported a drop in numbers of incidents, but along with that also reported an increase in the severity of incidents and the brutality of incidents, really. We also saw an increase in the number of injuries that victims experienced as a result of assaults in 2005.
And you also mentioned a troubling trend that it seemed like instead of individual attacks that a lot of the perpetrators were now acting in groups. Is that
right. We also saw an increase in 2005 of the number of perpetrators involved in each incident. So that's definitely a concerning trend.
And do you think that the political climate that comes across from our political leaders has a lot to do with the violence on the community?
Most definitely. Over the years that we've been doing the work that we do at the Colorado Anti-Violence Program, we've definitely seen a correlation between the social and political environment and the impact of violence against our communities. We really talk about 2004 and 2005 generally being pretty quiet years when we're talking about larger social and political environments. And when we look at 2006, we're just now starting to compile data on 2006, and that data will be released in a report that is set to come out at the end of April. But we're looking at numbers for 2006, and in looking at the data that we've collected, we're really seeing, again, an increase in numbers from 2005 to 2006, and we definitely are able to make some tie-ins to some of the political climate that we had going on in Colorado last year when we think about the issues that were coming up on the ballot during elections in 2006.
Do you think the more sympathetic, Democratic-controlled legislative houses in both the state legislature and the national political scene will have any impact on hate crimes legislation?
That's definitely our hope. There's an important piece of legislation that we see coming through right now in Colorado. We're really closely following ENDA, the Employment Non-Discrimination legislation, and we're really hoping that that will potentially contribute to a decrease in hate crimes. You know, anytime that a government can actually send a message to larger community by passing legislation that actually speaks to civil rights for our community, that's going to be really helpful. Our hope is that sends a loud and clear message that we are supported, that we are deserving of civil rights. And so we definitely hope to see some associated trends there.
While we've been discussing mostly violence from on our community from outside of our community, we should touch briefly on, there is also the topic of violence from within our own community, domestic violence within our own community. And the Colorado Anti-Violence Program is also there to help in that area as well. So speak a little bit about how you're there to help in that area.
So we work on both issues of hate violence and domestic violence. Domestic violence is an issue that's going to be really important for us to recognize because we find that largely within LGBTQ communities, there isn't really a lot of talk about domestic violence and the way that domestic violence impacts our communities and our intimate relationships. When we talk about the prevalence of domestic violence within our communities, we see some similarities with regards to the ways that domestic violence is experienced in straight relationships. So it's definitely an important issue. It's an issue that impacts our community, and it's an issue that we definitely need to be talking more about within our community.
So I think we can probably agree that the violence from without of our community is generated by lack of education. So if people just are more educated about what's really going on and not so scared, you know, homophobia is bred from fear. So I think that's what we really have to be most careful of. So before we go, I want to make sure our viewers know how to contact the Colorado Anti-Violence Program. Can you give us some information on how we can specifically get a hold of your organization?
Certainly. We have a 24-hour toll-free crisis hotline, and that's probably the most ideal way to reach us. That phone number is 888-557-4441, and again, that is a toll-free 24-hour crisis hotline. And so I would definitely encourage anyone who has any questions about violence against and within our communities, give us a call.
Terrific. If you have been a victim or know someone who has and needs help, please contact Colorado Anti-Violence Program. I want to thank Veronica Garcia so much for coming in and talking about this topic with us.
Definitely. Thanks for having me, Dale.
Thank you.
I know you want to stay connected with what's going on in our community. How? By watching the bulletin board, and of course, it's coming up right now. Hey, spring is just around the corner, so it's time for a few laughs, and this month's gay comedy movie delivers. Here's a look at Puccini for beginners.
Allegra, I'm not a lesbian, and you're not the right woman for me anyway.
I was made to be in a relationship. I'm smart, attractive. From now on, I'm just going to be by myself.
This kind of view makes you fall in love with the city all over again?
Think so? Makes me want to jump. Are you flirting with me?
She's a lesbian, but she's sleeping with you. Well, yeah.
Are you flirting with me? I don't know, probably. What's with all the cutout heads in your photos? My ex cut his head off.
You know what? This is where that belongs.
I asked you if you love me, and you can't even answer. You're like a guy. If I wanted something like this to happen, I would have had a one-night stand with another woman, not a straight man. Why can't people just fall in love, and then when it ends, it ends?
Isn't it a sign I should be following my heart instead of my head?
Oh, so wrecked.
You were not happy. You're a wreck.
Commit! That's what they do when you go to an insane asylum.
Please tell me you'll marry me. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Well, we're getting married.
You're what? That's my girlfriend.
You're what?
I'm a lesbian.
I'm cool with that.
I already have a boyfriend.
I don't want to marry you.
This wonderful movie opens March 30th at the Mayan. So if you like a free pair of tickets, just give us a call on the movie line at 303-861-0829. We'll give a pair of tickets to 10 randomly selected callers.
Feedback. We want feedback. Won't you tell us what you want to see? Email, voicemail, snail mail. You can get it to us easily. Someday, maybe you will see our show and think there is something we should know. Feedback, we need feedback. Oh, help us make good gay TV.
Colorado Outspoken needs to hear from you about what you like or don't like about our program. What do you want to see? After all, we make this show for you, so let us know what you think. Talking to us is easy. Just give us a call on the feedback line at 303-861-0829 and leave us a voicemail. You can also give us feedback on our website at www.coloradooutspoken.org. From our homepage, just click Contact Us, then click on our feedback email link or use the feedback form. Of course, you can always email us directly at feedback@coloradooutspoken.org. If you like to lick stamps, address that envelope to P.O. Box 9901, Denver, Colorado 80209. However you want to do it, let us hear from you.
Feedback. We want feedback. Oh, yeah, let's tell it to us. Oh, won't you help us? We'll make a gay TV.
Well, that's all we have for tonight. We want to thank all of you for joining us. We'll be back on Sunday, April 29th at 10 p.m. right here on KBDI Channel 12. So we hope to see you then. And of course, you can always check us out online at coloradooutspoken.org. I'm Stephen Montez. Good night.